A very good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this 92nd edition of the Together for Education webinars brought to you by Notebook. Exactly 365 days ago, on the 20th of April 2020, the first edition of the Together for Education webinars took place. The pandemic had just started, schools had shut down, and online learning was quickly coming to the fore. We at Notebook felt that we could create a community of educators around the globe who would help each other get through these tough times. What started as a humble move to try and get our educators more familiarized with the online learning techniques has today grown into something much, much bigger. 92 episodes in, we have discussed a variety of topics. We have discussed topics that are extremely curricular, talking about subjects, lesson plans. We have discussed about the extracurricular, about the house system, sports, theatre and school. And we have discussed topics like mental health, career counseling, the digital divide, and so much more. Week after week, the love and support that you have shown to this particular platform is the reason that it has grown. And for that, we thank you from the bottom of our hearts. Today, a year later, life has almost come a full circle. We are looking at the second wave, and I really hope that all of you and your loved ones are staying safe and healthy. We are again looking at online classes. Schools which were about to reopen are now talking about going into a longer break. The class 10 exams have been cancelled. Class 12 exams are yet to be decided. We at this platform will continue to strive and build a stronger community for all the educators out there. And your support again will play a key role in that. Today, we talk about a very interesting subject, social learning. Well, one of those cases where it's perhaps old wine and new bottle, because learning has been social for a very long time. Looking at the ancient Gurukul system, the students were, after all, mimicking a lot of what their gurus were teaching them. Watching others, observing their behavior, and learning from that has been something very key to human existence. And yet, a lot of research has today gone into social learning. Today, we will look at various facets of this concept, social learning, learning by observation. Our first speaker today is Mr. Philip Barrett. Mr. Barrett retired as the Deputy Headmaster from the illustrious Doon School in Dehradun after 44 years of serving in education across various institutions. Mr. Barrett served the Doon School as Housemaster, Head of Department, Dean of Activities, Dean of Student Welfare, Deputy Headmaster, Second Master, and Acting Headmaster with great distinction. He also carried out a visioning exercise for the Doon School in the year 2011 through an in-depth study of a number of British public schools and various schools in the US. Mr. Barrett qualified as a leadership trainer at Wellington College, UK in the year 2000. He is also an athlete, an adventurer, and a naturalist, and we at Notebook are privileged to have him as a senior advisor. Sir, thank you so much for being here. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Shubayu. And as ever, a very good evening to the Notebook team in Calcutta. Achin, you, Abhishek, and Meghna, and also to our esteemed panelists. I'm very happy to see a friend of mine, Namrata Pandey, here. Very, very happy to see you, Namrata. And also to our people, our friends who've tuned in. So yes, as you said, an interesting topic. If you get conscious of the way we learn, you could say that we learn in two ways. One is the conscious way, which is being taught by somebody, like addition and spelling. And the other is how we learn ourselves from our environment, from following examples, the influences in our lives, intuition, and through our senses. Now, the first takes place in schools and in formal institutions. The second never stops. It takes place in all other areas all the time. And it starts very early, far before we can walk. We look upon our parents' faces and can gauge by their expression what they like and what they don't like. We learn by watching, listening, intuiting, and by experiences in life. And also by reading things we come across, and also the songs we hear, the movies we watch. Now, just this morning, one of my daughters says to me that either I hold my spoon wrongly, and people who know me would agree. I have this overhand grip. And she said, no, I need to have the most sophisticated underhand grip. The way drummers hold their two sticks. It was simply because my parents held their spoons that way, and I never learned it correctly. I was never corrected by them. Of course, today I am very conscious of this, And when I'm in good company, I do hold it the correct way. But when I'm on my own unguarded moments, I revert to the way I learned at home by watching the wrong thing. Um, so much of children's learning takes place while we play, when they're in groups. And that's the way the play element, that's why the play element is so strong in early life. And also, what's important is the setting of correct examples by, by our mentors and adults. I mean, I've done a lot of social service and work in the hills over here. And I also find that the children that I work with, sometimes they don't show gratefulness in the way we expect them. They will bow and smile and put their hands together. But words like please and thank you somehow escape their vocabulary. It's the way they've been brought up, the way they have seen their elders do things. Subliminal learning is a very important aspect of school learning. The use of charts in classrooms, put very, inobtrusively in the corner, in the corridors, without really saying that the students must learn. You see reproductive systems and circulatory systems and the water cycle. Also, how to use fire extinguishers, exit routes from the floors, things like don't litter, switch off fans. When you see this continuously, you learn, even though no one's teaching you. Charts in doctors' chambers while one waits. In things that you see on TV screens, at airports, public places. In societies where we live, we have boards saying no smoking, no spitting, no horns. These are subliminal ways in which we pick up information. A lot of what we do or don't do is based on whether we get rewarded or punished for what we do. And when a child sees that some behaviors are dangerous and leads to painful consequences, they may be deterred. Likewise, behaviors which are rewarded and are pleasant tend to be perpetuated. In societies and close communities, people imbibe a culture that are expected of them by the elders. They don't have to be specifically taught these things. But the same people may seem odd and rude and out of place in another culture, another setting, which is alien to them. And so much office, corporate, and school culture is learned by social learning, just by watching and listening, because we all love to belong to a social group. We imitate what we see the others do, and we somehow imbibe what is right and what is wrong. I remember visiting tribal villages in the Northeast in Arunachal Pradesh in the 70s. Those days they were called Nifa. And I visited Dafla and Apatani villages, close communities that have not been exposed to, let's say, the world of science and even cars. And I had to eat and say and sit and do the right things just by watching the others, afraid of making a faux pas or a mistake. I had to gulp down boiled duck's eggs, washed down with very sour rice beer, without making a face, not trying to embarrass the headman. So I was learning on the spot what was right, what was wrong, just by looking at others, hoping I was doing the right thing. Social learning theory, as a theory, was the brainchild of a man called Albert Bandura and his student Richard Walters. And they state that we are social animals and learn from each other. There are 5 essential steps to social learning. One, of course, is observation. This is obvious. This is where we start. We start to notice things. The second is attention. We need to give attention to what we see. That is why the flipped classroom is so effective, because the work is done at home, online. Like the notebook lessons, you can go to a notebook class. And you come to class, and that time is spent in debate, in discussion. And the student has less chances of falling asleep because he's totally engaged with what the teacher is talking about. So you want attention. The third is retention. And this is when we react with people and learn. It becomes a part of us. The fourth is reproduction. We need to show that the behavior we learned is a part of us. The emotions we picked up is a part of us. And lastly, motivation. When the desired behavior is rewarded and applauded, as human beings, we love getting positive affirmation. We are motivated to continue to do these things. So motivation leads to the perpetuation of a habit or an emotion. These Bandura and clan also stated that people learn better when they learn together, when they exchange knowledge, perspectives, and when they mentor each other uh, and imitate each other. Bandura also and his team emphasized the importance of observing, modeling, imitating the behaviors, attitudes, and emotional reactions of other social learning. And sorry, and considers how environment and cognitive factors interact to influence human learning and behavior. Now, they emphasized how the mediating process occurs between stimuli and response. So we see something, there's a pause, there's a gap, we learn, and then we respond. And the second is how behavior is learned from the environment through the process of observation. Bandura speaks of how children learn through observing adults and caregivers, and how they are surrounded by elders, TV, movies, and all these influences also lead to gender sensitive behavior. Their behavior is reinforced by the reward or punishment, as I said, and they receive feedback in order to establish the accepted behavior. Children first imitate people they're familiar with, like their parents, their tribe, their gender. We all love to seek approval, but first it's our close friends, then the same sex, maybe your schoolmate. And then as you learn, you are willing to learn from people who are further away from you. And so children also learn the correct behavior by seeing what the consequences of others' behavior is like. So I, being the eldest child in my family, was pressurized to set examples for my younger siblings. So whenever something went wrong, I was to blame because I wasn't setting the example. But very usually when things went right, I was not given the credit, So, that was one thing, being the eldest in the family was a problem. Yeah? So children relate to role models whom they appreciate, even fictional characters, when they see that taking on the behavior of these models leads to happiness, reward, which is what they want. Now, this is like Freud's Oedipal and Electra complex, where identification takes place with the same-sex parents. But in social behavior, the child can imitate the behavior from either parent. Bandura also talks about how children do not immediately take on observed behavior or traits. There is a gap, as he said, between the stimulus and response. And this gap is the time when reasoning takes place. This is when the mediating takes place. So nothing is learned straight away. You need to have that pause. Social learning is being noticed today because of the stress on digital learning and the rise of social media. As people are locked in with the pandemic raging outside, we can still learn by connecting with others and learning on learning platforms. Bandura claimed that we retain 5% of what we hear, 10% of what we read, but about 50% of what we discuss and interact. But when we interact on the job, we retain almost 75%. Now, while his theories applies more to corporate workspaces and offices, we can also apply social learning in schools by making teamwork and group learning a part of the teaching methodology. Project work, research in groups where kids learn from each other. Second, setting homework where kids can communicate with each other on Zoom and other platforms so that they can discuss outside school. The flipped classroom is the third, which I mentioned before. And lastly, I want to end by saying, by making it clear where children can get help from teachers, books, and other resources, and to arrange brainstorming sessions where students can learn through group discussion. And with that, Subayu, I look forward to hearing from our esteemed panel. Of course, Achin goes next. And thank you very much for listening in. And over to you, Subayu.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you for that wonderful opening. As you have said earlier, every week we benefit from the wonderful insights that you bring to the introduction of any topic that we discuss. Well, as sir mentioned, our next speaker is Achin Bhattacharya. Achin is the founder and CEO at Notebook. A chartered accountant by training, Achin was a director at Deloitte prior to starting Notebook. He has worked in India and abroad in various senior capacities in GE, PwC, KPMG, and Deloitte. He is a fellow of the ICAI and a member of CPA Australia. He is also the recipient of the prestigious Indian Achievers Award. Achin is an avid reader and a passionate traveler with keen interests in economics, history, literature, and philosophy. He is a regular speaker at various forums and chambers of commerce and also contributes articles to numerous publications regularly. He is also on the board of some of the most renowned corporates and contributes significantly to their brand strategies. Achin, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. Shiva, am I audible?
Yeah, Achin, loud and clear.
I once again welcome all of you to today's session on a topic which is perhaps becoming more and more important with each passing year. With advent of technology and social media, when all of us, and especially children, are closely watching and keeping a tab on their role models and trying to imbibe their traits and ape their behavior. Now, here the question is not only why they do it, but how do we practically mitigate any risk of negative influence? Now, social learning or observational learning occurs as a function of observation, imitation, and modeling behavior that we observe in others. Now, interestingly, this has often been called the bridge. This has been called the bridge between cognitive and behaviorist learning theories, because very naturally we would agree that it involves A, memory, B, motivation, and C, of course, attention. Now, it is most associated with the work of, as Birdsong mentioned, and without mentioning him, of course, the whole origin of this topic, the work of psychologist Albert Bandura, who conducted some really groundbreaking experiments in this subject and initiated the famous social learning theory. Now, people learn through observing others' behaviors, attitude, and outcome of those behaviors. Now, outcome also is equally important. Now, most human behavior, according to Bandura, most human behavior is learned observationally through modeling. From observing others, naturally, one forms an idea of how new behaviors are performed. And on later occasion, this coded information definitely serves as a guide for future action. Now, if we try to break this down into various very important components, like we discussed about attention. So naturally, factors like complexity, prevalence, retention, again, which will include symbolic rehearsal, mental images, reproduction, including physical capabilities, and motivation, including past, promised, and vicarious motivation. Now, Bandura, he believed in reciprocal determinism. That is, the world and a person's behavior affect each other. Now, the theory is related to, and there is another very important theory. This is related to Vygotsky's social development theory. And also, there's another very important theory with regard to situated learning, which was by Levin, which also emphasized the importance of social learning. Now, we were discussing about this important experiment, the Bobo doll experiment, which was a study which was conducted by Albert Bandura to investigate if social behaviors can be learned by just watching others in action. By just watching others, what is the effect? Now, before coming to this famous experiment, I will refer to a very important television show, it was a very popular television show, an American television show a few years back. I remember watching some episodes of it called Big Little Lies. Now, this was based on a novel by the same name. The name of the novel and the name of the serial was exactly the same. I think this was some 4 or 5 years back. Now, in this particular serial, I remember tensions run really high as a child is accused of choking another child, another student. And throughout the series, there's a little spoiler, the child is revealed as a character Max. In a later point of time, it is being shown that the reason why he behaves in such a way, the reason why he chokes a friend of his, another child, is because he had an abusive father. In his childhood, he had an abusive father. And once Max's mother realizes that her child is learning behaviors from her husband, she decides to take action. And this cycle of abuse is very sad. But it's extremely common in today's world. Many abusers were abused themselves or grew up in households where they witnessed these things firsthand for no fault of theirs. Now, this might seem very obvious, but in mid-20th century, evidence that support these ideas were just starting to become known. Now, standing today, it looks very obvious. But if you look at the time when this particular experiment was conducted in 1961, at that point of time, these ideas were just coming to the surface. Thus, this Canadian-American psychologist, Albert Bandura, conducted this experiment at Stanford University. Now, very interesting, he placed few children in a room with an adult, some toys, and a 5-foot-tall Volvo doll. 5-foot-tall doll. As you are aware, that these Volvo dolls are large inflatable clowns that are a kind of shaped like a bowling ball pin. So they always roll upwards because there's weight at the bottom. So they will always roll upward. The moment you punch it, it will come back. Now, anyways, this experiment made Bandura, I'll say, one of the most famous psychologists in the history of the world. One of the most famous. And to this day, he is listed in the ranks of, say, Freud or Skinner. But how were these experiments conducted? And why did they at all change the world of psychology? And why are we discussing this today in 2021? What is its impact today? So to start with, we'll talk about first the experiment which was conducted in 1961, because there are 3 experiments. We are discussing about the first one. He conducted this again in 3 different parts. First, modeling. Second, aggression arousal. And third, a test for delayed imitation. So stage 1 was modeling. And the study was separated into 3 groups, including a control group. Now, 2 of the groups were in a room with a model who basically was just an adult. Now, the group witnessed the adult model punching the doll repeatedly using harsh, aggressive language. And at times, the model also hit the doll with a mallet in its head. The second group actually did not see this behavior. So the first group, they witnessed this violent behavior of the adult. But the second group, they did not see this behavior. They simply observed an adult model playing with blocks or coloring or doing other non-aggressive childhood activities. Now, the idea was to give a very different kind of experience to separate groups to see if they are actually watching the models and then whether or not they imitate those behaviors. So stage 2, so this is the first stage, which is the modeling. 2 different groups, one group being shown aggressive behavior, the other group being shown normal behavior. Second stage, as I told you, aggression arousal. So after 10 minutes of being in the room with the model, children were taken to another room. Now, the other room had all kinds of attractive toys. So for some time, they were allowed to play with those toys. But in the middle of their play, the toys were taken away. And the children were taken to another adjacent room. And in the other room, and naturally when they were taken to the other room, the children were frustrated because they were disturbed in the middle of their play. And that was done purposefully because the researchers wanted to see what these children would do and how they would release their frustration. So again, this is aggression arousal. Now in stage 3, which is the delayed imitation. So first modeling, second aggression arousal, third delayed imitation. In stage 3, which is the delayed imitation, the third room contained a set of aggressive and non-aggressive toys. So both kind of toys. The room also had a Bobo doll. Now researchers watched and recorded each child's behavior through a one-way mirror. So the child couldn't understand that the researchers were keeping a watch. Now we'll wonder what happened. Now the children, as I'm sure all of you already guessed, the children who observed the adult hitting the doll were actually more likely to take out their frustration by hitting the doll. And also they kicked, they yelled, they even used a mallet to hit the doll in its head. And also they also found out more innovative techniques of trying to hit the doll, things that they haven't even seen. Now, I think one of the most important part is that the children that observe the non-aggressive behavior were more likely to stay away from the doll and take their frustration out without aggression or violence. Now, this means a lot. It means from an early age sometimes, and mostly too early to remember, we are actually learning how to cope with frustration and negative situations just by watching our parents or other elders. And the problem is nobody actually picks their parent with means you could be modeling healthy behavior or really unhealthy behavior. Now, this was the first experiment. The second experiment, which was conducted 2 years later. So first was 1961, second 1963. Now, again with the doll, and this one combined the ideas of modeling also with the ideas of conditioning, another well-known idea. And what was the other well-known idea in psychology? Now, they wanted to know, and the objective was that Bandura wanted to know, were people truly motivated by consequences, or was there something more to their behavior and attitudes in the experiment? Thus, he showed children a video of a model acting aggressively towards the doll. Again, 3 groups of children. And in the final scene, children, like these 3 groups, were shown different outcomes. So the initial part of the video was same, but the final outcome, but 3 different outcomes was shown. One group was shown that the adult who is hitting the doll is being rewarded. So for abusive and aggressive behavior, the adult is actually being rewarded. Second group was shown that the adult is being reprimanded, like he's being punished, he's being asked not to, he's being warned, he's being asked not to behave in such a way. And the third group, where there is no implication, neither reward nor reprimand. And then again, these children, he wanted to find out that what is the impact. How does it actually impact them? Like once they see that, okay, this is the outcome of this aggressive behavior, does it really change their own behavior? Now, this is interesting because when researchers asked the children to act aggressively towards the doll, like they saw in the movie, the children did. Now, this doesn't sound significant at first, but it does make an interesting point about learned behaviors. So by watching the model and observing the actions, children did learn the behavior. And also the consequences. Now, children who saw the adult being rewarded were likely to be more aggressive. Children who saw the adult being reprimanded or warned not to do so were completely taken aback, etc. So that means consequences also had a major role. And this was really interesting. Now, this was the second experiment. The third one in 1963, one more piece, last piece, that is worth mentioning. Now, while some children in the group watched a movie and other children were shown a live model show. So one group, a recorded version of a movie, and the other group, a live model show. The objective was to find out that does this make any difference, huge difference, in whether or not children learn and displayed the aggressive behaviors? The answer is not really. So this experiment has come into conversation again and again. So that means when I'm saying not really, that means whether they're watching it live or watching it a recorded version in a movie, outcome is more or less the same. Now, psychologists and researchers have debated the idea and impact of things like, for example, violent media, where children play or watch video games with violence, and they're more likely to commit violence. Or also, I think very important, because today, if you see, this is a cause of major concern. For instance, television broadcasts of conflicts happening around the world. And if children are being allowed to watch it, what is the negative impact on them? Because it might actually be teaching them aggressive styles of behavior, weakening restraints over aggression, and also kind of desensitizing them or habituating them to human cruelty. Thus, when we look at Bandura and his contribution to behaviorism, we need to remember that behaviorism deals with learning behaviors. And according to Bandura, behaviors can be learned through observation and modeling. Therefore, it is important that what we put our students through, what they actually observe and what they see, because they actually imitate what they see. And what is that they're trying to copy? Because they will learn behaviors that way. So A, observation, B, imitation. Now, also, for instance, as we were discussing about the particular experiment, when they are shown aggressive behavior, rude behavior, inappropriate behavior. So these kind of behaviors can be very easily picked up by watching, as we discussed, say, for example, violent cartoons, movies, or at times watching adults fight and argue. So it is very important for parents also to be very careful about their own behavior in the front of young children. Because it is very, very easy and very natural for them to pick it up from there. And that, again, might have a lifelong effect. Because what they learn at home, similarly, they behave with their friends in school, and they tend to continue that behavior later in life as well. Now, again, other around, so we were discussing about aggressive behavior, other around, say, for example, passive behavior, quietness, or being reserved, subdued, can also be learned by watching adults behave that way. Therefore, the kind of responsibility this puts on adults, especially parents and teachers, because these two adults are integral part of any children's life, their growing up years. How parents behave and interact with them, how teachers behave and interact with them. And undoubtedly, this will have a lasting impression on students. And at times, this impression is so ingrained, it's so imbibed that it tends to continue without the student even realizing, and it will be very difficult for him or her to come out of it. And because naturally they will imitate it. And that has been proved time and again as we discussed about these experiments. So we need to be careful in terms of our behavior and how we are coming up as role models, how we need to behave in certain ways, because they are learning by watching us. Similarly, so not only about parents and teachers, because in today's age, considering the advent of technology, considering how social media has actually become a integral part of our daily lives, how children, teenagers, day in and day out, they are keeping a watch on their role models. So be it movie stars, be it sports person, be it other social media, other influencers, be it activists. Now, this also, I'll say, entrusts a huge responsibility on these role models in terms of how they behave. because it's very natural for children to pick it up from there. And with the kind of advent of technology and the way things are changing, this again is inevitable. Thus, it's also very important for, I guess, for parents also to keep a watchful eye in terms of who are the child's role models. Because undoubtedly, this will have an effect on his or her behavior and other traits. So I think these are a few things that I wanted to discuss. I really thank all of you for giving me a patient hearing. Today, we have a stellar panel lined up. And in this very important topic, which has got so much of practical implication on our day-to-day lives, I really look forward to hear from them. Over to you, Shubhai.
Thank you, Achin. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. I think it gives a great background to the whole study of social learning leading up to the wonderful discussion that we have to follow. Before we go on to the discussion we have at hand, I want to tell you a little bit about Notebook. We at Notebook are an EdTech organization. We create small, crisp videos pertaining to the school syllabus, which means for every class, for every subject, and for every chapter, you would find multiple learning videos on our website and our mobile apps. Now, these videos come in handy in two cases. One, let's say you as an educator have to take an online class. As Bharat mentioned, the flipped classroom concept is now quickly catching on. You can send a link to the Notebook video pertaining to the chapter that you're about to teach to the student 2 or 3 days in advance. The student can watch the video as many times as they want because they have access to the same videos from their home computers as well. Be it a computer, a laptop, or a smartphone, they can watch these videos. They come to class prepared with their understanding of the videos, and then you can utilize your class time better for discussions, debates, and a deeper dive into the topic. Months later, when the students have to prepare for their exams, they have access to the same videos, again on their personal devices. That means they can watch either the long lesson videos, which are 6 to 10 minutes in length at best, or even the short recap videos, which are just 2 to 3 minutes in length, to prepare for their exams better. What I will do now is play you a short sample of a mashup of a number of Notebook videos so that you know exactly what kind of videos we produce and what is it that I'm going on about.
नमस्ते बच्चों, नोटबुक में आपका स्वागत है। इस नए वीडियो को आपके सामने प्रस्तुत करते हुए हमें बेहद खुशी हो रही है। हमारा उद्देश्य है परंपरागत शिक्षा को आधुनिक तरीके से पेश करना, ताकि हमारी ये नई पीढ़ी या आप सभी कहीं भी कभी भी इसे आसानी से पढ़ सकें।
Hello students, today we are going to study the story Madam Rides the Bus, written by Valli.
The king, Louis XVI, had come to power in 1774 at only 20 years of age. The king helped the 13 American colonies gain independence from Britain.
Curly brown hair turning permanently black. If you memorize this line, it will help you remember the ratios all your life. How? Let's see. Some people have is a way of remembering sine is equal to perpendicular by hypotenuse. Provides energy for everything you do throughout the day. Next is the nucleus, the brain of the cell. This is where all the secrets are stored. Why do you think you have black eyes as your parents? Aha! Thank the nucleus.
Whoa! What is this? We are gonna drown.
Don't worry, you're not going to drown. This is the cytoplasm.
Sometimes, a fully grown individual, such as Hydra or Planaria or starfish, can give rise to a complete individual from its body parts. Isn't this interesting?
नोटबुक में आप सभी का पुनः स्वागत है।
Well, ladies and gentlemen, that was a little bit about Notebook. We shall now move on to the wonderful panel that we have today to discuss this topic. We are privileged to have with us Dr. Neeru Arora, who is the principal of the Govindgarh Public School in Punjab. She holds a PhD in English Literature, an MPhil, a UGC NET qualified MEd, a BSc in Medical. She has been a resource person for CBSE workshops on teaching English language, classroom management, and leadership. She's an educationist by profession and a trainer by passion for more than 16 years now. She has worked as an assistant professor in various degree colleges and teachers training institutes. She has worked as a training head in FCS Foundation for Punjab Senior Secondary Schools, handled many assignments as a resource person for various faculty development programs, worked as a proofreader, translator, and editor for books and research works, worked as a school principal for the last 9 years, and delivered many successful workshops on good parenting, effective communication, and life skills. Ma'am, thank you so much for being here. It's a privilege to have you with us. We also have with us Mrs. Sophie Naskar, who is the principal of Advantage School in Guwahati. She has 24 years of experience in teaching, training, and school administration. She is a recipient of the ECDF Pinnacle Award 2019 in the category Top 10 Principals of the Year. She is an ECCE specialist and founder principal of 3 preschools. She is an author, a mentor, and an academic consultant for various preschools. Ma'am, once again, thank you so much for making the time and being here with us today. We have with us Mrs. Upama Mahajan. She holds a postgraduate degree in English, a bachelor's of education, a master's in education, and a master in philosophy from Periyar University in Tamil Nadu. She is currently pursuing her doctorate in educational psychology. She cleared her CTET in 2013 and holds a diploma in software technology. She is having 7 years of teaching experience and 5.5 years of administrative experience. She is currently working as the principal of Sumitra Devi Arya Senior Secondary School, Dinanagar, since 2012. She has been working as a resource person with CBSE and freelancer in CCE, life skills, behavior management, lesson planning, time management, stress management, and classroom management. She has conducted more than 40 workshops in various schools in North India. She has been the recipient of a number of awards. To name a few among them, the PM's Award for India's Best Orator at PM's Rally in the year 2000, participated in Republic Day Parade as NCC Cadet in the year 2000. She was honored by Governor of Punjab and the Education Minister both in the year 2000, the College Roll of Honor in Government College Kapurthala in the year 2004, and she has to accredit 11 certificates of Zonal and Final Youth Festival conducted during various sessions by GNDU Amritsar. She's received the Best Principal Award by Bharat Vikas Parisad Gurdaspur, the Best Principal Award by Bharat Vikas Parisad Dinanagar, Dr. APJ Abdul Kalam Award for Enrichment in Education by IITA, and Shiksha Alankar Prasad, Shiksha Alankar Award by Khabre Abhi Tak in 2018. Ma'am, thank you so much for being here today and gracing our platform. We also have with us Namrata Pandey, the founder and chief mentor at La Mentora. She's had more than 20 years of experience in the field of guidance and counseling. She was the first professional career counselor employed by the Doon School in Dehradun. She pioneered the setting up of Careers, Information, Education and Guidance Department of the Doon School and steered its growth from a 2-person entity in 2007 when she joined to a full-fledged department, which has been responsible for the placement of Doon boys in colleges all over the world, many of them in the Ivy Leagues. Namrata also works with an education overseas company, the Chopras in Delhi, and managed the Chandigarh branch for 3 years. She's traveled extensively to universities in India and abroad, with a postgraduate diploma in guidance and counseling from NCERT and a master's in psychology from Delhi University. She also has a graduate certificate in career development practice from Career Education Association of Victoria, Australia, and has attended the Harvard University Summer Institute on College Admissions. She is a member of the ISCSE, which was formerly known as the OACSE. Until recently, she was also the International Admissions Advisor to the University of Hong Kong. Ma'am, thank you so much for coming back to us because we've had you once before. Thank you so much for making the time. It's a privilege to have all of you on this wonderful platform. Let me stop my share, switch on my camera so that we can start the discussion. Well, once again, thank you. Thank you so much for being here today. It's an absolute privilege. Dr. Arora, I'll come to you first. We'll pick up some talking points. It's a free-flowing discussion. The audience who are listening in on this, please know that you can always type in your questions in the Q&A box and we will try and answer them the best we can. The first question, Dr. Arora, that I have is when you're dealing with your students, how do you teach them the power of observation that seems crucial to the social learning process?
Very good evening to all the participants, all the panelists. Jai Hind. I believe observation is one of the central skill to any kind of learning in our life. So these days, when we are not in schools, our children are not in schools from more than 1 year. I believe there has been increasing emphasis on life skills. And I believe observation as such is actually becoming sometimes a kind of, plethora of information being thrown to children because they are open, they are having open access to internet. Earlier, we used to stop them stop them from using mobiles, but now it has become a necessary evil that we will have to give them. So it has actually become very tough for all of us that observation is taught to children. Basically, observation is coming naturally to them. Now, our role as teachers or as a principal or as an administrator has changed, that we will have to ensure that children are observing the right things. And where observation is central to everything, they are not only observing the things unconsciously, but they are conscious what they're observing and how they are using that particular information and how that particular information is being processed and what kind of attitudes, what kind of skills are further based on it. So I believe the increased emphasis on the things like sports integrated projects, setting up of various labs in schools, like be it STEM lab, be it robotics lab, be it any other lab, the one notion or one thing behind everything goes is that we want to capture their observation in one way or another way. So with the pandemic, with the online education, it has become all the more vital for all of us actually to ensure that children are observing the things which we want to show. Uh, uh, in the world of internet, you can always like give them some kind of case studies to make them agile to the observations. You can always give them some sort of pictures. You remember when in our childhood there used to be two pictures side by side, and we were asked to find out the difference between the two, those two pictures. And then there was a mathematical game. We used to put circles and cross, So we will have to apply our mind and we'll have to observe where we actually need to put a cross and where we actually need to put a circle. So I believe that was a thing where we could have actually developed the observation. But in online, yes, you can develop observations. Suppose you send a music clip to children, podcast to children. Ask them, okay, tell me how many times this particular word have been used in this particular podcast, or where this music, this beat has been used how many times. So these are some of the instances which I believe can be used for improving the observation skill of children in online process. But in classes, it was fun because you could always, pick up some children from your class. You could have divided them into two groups. One group must be acting in one way, another group must be acting in another way, and whole class was observing what is actually going on. So it was rather easy in physical mode. Of course, it is very, very tough because now students are so ingrained, or they are feeling so full with the visual clues. So internet is what? It is all about visual clues. So they are so full of the visual clues that they have stopped actually noticing everything. So I believe we need to go to back to basic, and we need to actually develop such kind of picture recognition or some kind of sequences specially designed for them so as to catch up their observation. That's it.
Thank you so much, ma'am.
Thank you.
Sophie, ma'am, if I may come to you next, the same question. How do you teach the power of observation? How do you make somebody more observant? Ma'am, you'll have to unmute yourself. Ma'am, you're actually on mute. If you could unmute yourself, please. Ma'am, you'll have to unmute yourself. At the bottom left, you should have a buttons saying unmute. Yeah.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you now. Thank you.
Good evening, Shubhayu.
Good evening.
And thank you for having me in the panel. Since I am from the preschool segment, I would like to talk on the observation that children actually take on from the 0 age. As we know, humans are social animals, and we have plenty of social behaviors that have got implications. And since we have to see that once an infant is born into the family, we have to
Ma'am, I think there's a bit of a connectivity issue. We are not being able to hear you very clearly. Namrata ma'am, Upma ma'am, if you could just quickly verify that it's not an issue at my end.
No, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you.
Ma'am is frozen.
Yeah, your voice is quite audible. Probably her at her end the network issues there.
She's left.
Must be. We'll just wait for her to join back. Upma ma'am, in the meantime, if we may come to you with the same question in your school, what are the steps that you take to actively teach children to be more observant, become better observers? Ma'am, you'll have to unmute yourself. I think you went back on mute.
Yeah, a very good evening, everybody. And a big thank you to Notebook to provide me this technological platform to share my views. I have this platform sharing with my dear friend, Dr. Neeru. So it's a great privilege that we are having around 250 participants who are joining this discussion forum. And I think the topic is very much apt to the situation that we are at present facing in our schools. And Notebook is providing a great platform to a great help to the school, a platform to the students, where they are getting an insight into what they need to see, what they need to learn, and how they need to interact. Right? We all were quite worried when we went online, when we had to pick up some sort of medium to reach out to our students, to have a flipped classroom technology. And I must thank all the teaching fraternity, a salute to all of you who have learned the technological fundas in fraction of seconds, who have spent their days and nights in understanding how different platforms work. And yes, at my school, we are doing quite a lot of experiments, and my staff is very much cooperating in doing different activities which we are experimenting with. It is actually going on with the subject-wise happenings which we are doing in our school. For example, I would love to share with you that we have taken the SST classes on the rooftop, where teachers has shown the weather today and how the clouds look today, how sunny it is today. And we have performed various in-home experiments for our science classes. Giving you a few examples, reversible and irreversible changes. Children had a great time learning how to how the fermentation in the curd takes place, how the dosa batter comes so nicely. So there, as every situation has two sides, two folds, so the same is here. And I'm thankful to those parents also who are quite interactive with their children, and who are looking into what their child do the whole day, right? So if they see to it that what the child is watching, even if we provide the kid an open access to television. See, it has been there since our childhoods also. So the parents were quite concerned about what type of programs, what channels my child is watching. We have n number of informative channels on the dish TVs, on the cables also. To name a few, we have Nat Geo, we have BBC Earth, we have history channels, we have PTLCs, and all those channels, they create an inquisitiveness in our children, wherein they can just reach out to the places probably they would not be able to go throughout their lives. And they would reach Antarctic, they would see the live shows of those penguins and all. So there are a number of programs over those channels also, which children would love to see how the life is there in a jungle, where we see the wildlife sanctuaries live. So these type of guidance, if we are keeping in touch with our students, it is very, very effective style of teaching. Even if in the remote areas we are having the connectivity issues, the children are unable to join, we can simply let them know that at this time this program is going to come, so it is so connected to your so and so subject. For social sciences, you have many such things coming up on History Channel. We can explore many good sites. Now the open access of internet is quite a challenging question in front of many parents and teachers, yet we are quite able to control it to a large extent by sharing some of the material with the students, where they are just going to watch only those things which we are sharing to them. And yes, parenting tips to the parents are quite important in this pandemic, because as they are also working, they don't have an access to what the child is watching. So a parent log to various sites, looking into the history, what their child has watched the whole day. So these are some of the tips which we have given to the parents, and I'm quite hopeful that this is again a learning session, also an introspection session again for us, and an updation session for many of the teachers and fraternity educationists like me, brushing up our skills and updating our knowledge and exploring what others are doing. How can I improve as an individual? So this is actually required at this period of time, because I firmly believe that वक्त उसी का चेहरा बिगाड़ता है जो अपना चेहरा किसी और के रुमाल से झाड़ता है. So we have to see that how nicely we come in tune with the time, and we invent, we discover our own ways and procedures through which we are going to be so closely bonded to our students that they feel that this is the person whom I can talk to, whom I can share my problem with, whom I can interact and get my problems sorted. Thank you so much. That was all from my side.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Namrata ma'am, I will first ask you a very technical question, and then obviously the same question to you once again. Ma'am, is observation a skill or a trait? Is it something that you can really teach somebody?
Yes, it's a skill. It's not a trait. You're not born with observational skills. And we can very easily teach children how to observe and what to observe. So we can't hide and, keep our children protected from the bad observation also. They also need to observe the bad. But we as mentors, I'm a counselor, I work with students individually, and teachers and parents, the adults in their lives actually. It's up to us to teach them how to decipher the bad and the good. But certain things that, and I'm not going to talk about, because everyone knows what social learning is. There's been taught, a lot of talk has been done about it. I think what we do, because students come to me when they are in class 8 and class 9, and we take them through till class 12th when they're ready to apply to universities. What we want to do with children in grade 8 and grade 9 is to create this sense of observation. There's an influx of, information. I get distracted myself as an adult at 50 years of age. We need so much time to control our behaviors. What we do is, any book that they read or any TV show that is being seen by them, we want them to write a reflective piece on it, a podcast that they listen. Try to understand and, cut the flag. Let's get to the bottom of it. I think that discussion is very, very important where students are concerned, for them to be able to learn observation and the right kind of observation. So books, TV shows, happenings that are happening. If the pandemic is happening, what is it that is good behavior or bad behavior? How do you be, well, how are you responsible citizens? How are you not? I would also think that, just talking to them and making them understand. Now, suppose they've read a book or 20 books, so 20 pages of a book. We send them book lists. We send them books that they should be reading. Of course, they are going to read some pulp fiction and they're going to read some academic articles. So they listen to podcasts. We send them a list of books for age appropriate. Okay, so everything cannot be understood by everyone else. And then get them to read a piece and analyze it. And then we have a discussion over it. Now, I have the time to do that individually, but in a classroom, it has to be done generally for everyone. But the same thing can be done with parents. Parents can set out time during the day where they discuss things that are happening so that they understand what the child is taking in and what they're observing. There's this, and there are a lot of these games that are available. I was reading something on the site of MIT, where there's something called a monkey business. So when you're watching something with observation, you're not watching things in the periphery. But that's also important, because all of these things add to what you're going to observe later in life when you are an adult. You're young adults, you're school students, high school students, but you're going to be a young adult as soon as you get to 18. We have to teach them the skills. We need to make sure they understand the right from the wrong. And of course, we can cover that later, but I think discussion, books, TV shows, whatever they're watching, if they're watching, and the kids are watching very different things from us. They're watching absolutely different shows. I get to know a lot of what they're watching because I'm constantly talking to them. They don't see me as a threat. They don't see me as someone who's judging them. And if a parent can have that relationship with a child, where the child feels not, I'm not being judged, I'm not being put down, I'm being able to express, we giving them a safe space. If you can't do that, maybe you could find an older cousin or someone, older. So all of those things, but observing, getting them to say, oh, what do you think was wrong in this TV show? Did you think that this person reacted in this manner? Could they have reacted in another manner? Let's take another ending to this TV show. What are the possible endings? They will learn. If it becomes a game, they will learn to observe so that they can show reactions. And then we can come to consequences for every action of theirs. So yeah, I'll stop there because, I can go on and on and on. And ma'am is back, so I'm sure she would need to speak. Yeah.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I have often wondered if all the sitcoms that we have on most of our Indian channels, they are counterproductive for education. For the first time, I've seen value in them. You can always show kids these channels and say, this is something wrong. Yeah. So learn from that. I think that's one way of using them to our benefit. Sophie ma'am, thank you so much for joining us back. I believe you had some connectivity issues, but if I could ask you that question once again.
Yeah.
Regarding observation.
Thank you. I'm so sorry I was disconnected. I'm talking on the perspective of the preschool experience. Here, the children are in the formative years, and this is a very crucial age where children are just like sponge, as I was saying. They can just take in any and everything that is in front of them, regardless of good or bad. They have no idea, right? So as adults and as educators, as facilitators in school, and as adult parents and adult family members, our moral responsibility foremost is to actually see that we give them a conducive environment, an environment that is really going to feed them with healthy, good, and progressive kind of information and observation. Because as we are all talking about observation and learning, they start observing even before they start speaking, right? So when they learn to speak only after they have observed and listened to us. So speaking comes way after all the observation and information that has been gathered, right? So here what we have to do as adult parents and facilitators, we have got various methods of giving them, rewarding them by positive reinforcements, where we can reward them for every good act that they display or behavior that they display, so that they can be encouraged and they should be felt that yes, they have done something good and they are being rewarded for something that they should be continuing doing. And when we give them a star or a smiley or a kind of a sticker on their face or in their hand, little children, they love to get those kind of awards. And they feel so proud and honored, they feel lovely and they feel so happy and the first thing is that when they get something, they show it to their peer groups. And the moment they see their parents, they show, see today what I have got. It's a big thing for them. It's a very important aspect of getting rewarded by the teacher or by the adult among themselves. So it's a proud moment for them. So when we start doing positive reinforcement for them by rewarding their good deeds and behaviors, we can also do differential reinforcement, where we are rewarding them for their positive attributes, definitely, and simultaneously ignoring the wrong behaviors or the words or the behavioral attitude that they have, and not giving in more important and focus and limelight to those aspects, right? When they see that I am not being noticed for what I am doing for quite some time by the adults, whoever is there, whether it's in the school scenario or whether it is home or be it in the social place, when the child sees that I am throwing some kind of tantrums or doing something which actually I know or I may not know that I am doing, which is not being appreciated, then what happens? The differential reinforcement starts working, because when I'm ignoring the child's aggressive behavior or the child's tantrum, then the child self-correction takes place. Okay, so what happens here? The child has understood I'm not being rewarded, neither I am being punished, but I am not being noticed. And no child likes to be going unnoticed. They love everything that they do. They love to be in the limelight. They enjoy that limelight. So the moment you show them that you're not in the limelight, you are not there in the center focus of what you're doing and you are being sidelined, they kind of self-correct themselves. And then they change their behavior, they calm down. And what happens is they come back to the good aspects of what is expected for them to do and come back to the good classroom behavior or the social behavior that is expected by the adult. So we have to, we cannot teach them. We have to model before them. We have to show them. And even by narrating beautiful moral stories by rhymes, by songs, by even some cartoons. There are some wonderful cartoons which show huge amount of moral responsibility to the children, teach it even at that very age, how to have very good friendship, how to keep family, and how to live in family, the social etiquettes and all those behaviors. They may not know the terminologies, but they emulate. And each and every child has their own cognitive world. They live in their own cognitive world. So they kind of relate to those characters. So what do we as adults need to give it to them? We need to give them those food on the plate which they can eat, enjoy, and appreciate and learn accordingly. We cannot talk to them as the way we talk to elders. We have to go down to their level, to their understanding, to their mindset, and become like a child in our adult age and try and understand and be a part of them. And when they see this happening, definitely they observe you as a very good, you are showing a good quality to the child, right? So when you are showing a positive quality towards the child is going to emulate those positive attributes from you and try to bring it about in its own behavior. And that's how we are actually encouraging the child, not just by talking to them, not by showing them. We can also do it by hands-on experiments, by hands-on experience work, by learning by doing methods also, we can make them do all those things. So when the child is actually getting into the field and doing something which she has observed for quite some time, this learning by doing is a fantastic method of child learning, as well as the child even gets the opportunity of self-correction. The child is able to correct oneself when the child is going wrong somewhere and has understood that, no, I am not doing it correctly. The child is observing the rest of the people around, and the child makes this necessary correction and learns to do it correctly. So even words, whether we are doing it observational learning, also when we are talking, when we are in verbal communication, here again, the child is listening to us. And then again, the child is speaking what the child has heard without knowing whether it is good or bad. So actually, it's us, all of us, each one of us, each adult, whether it is home, whether it is school, whether it is any kind of situation that we can think about. We are the first people to be very, very careful what we want our child to see from us, emulate us, take it out and behave, because they are wonderful imitators. Thank you.
Wonderful, ma'am. Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, let's just check with all of you if I get this basic funda right? Because social learning is new for me. So there's a set of stimuli, visual cues, however you call them, that the child is exposed to. And the interpretation of those stimuli or visual cues, whether something is positive or negative, the value judgment is what is kind of built into the child through either telling them that this is right or this is wrong, or by somebody actually taking that choice in front of them, which is the role modeling bit that you spoke about. And this finally becomes a long-term learning, saying that, okay, this is right, this is wrong. The value judgment is built up, right? Now, besides the educator, where you also have a significant amount of control over the kind of cues that you provide to the child, you also have the parent, right? And they are dealing with a larger universe of visual cues because they don't have tremendous control over who walks past their child or how people are behaving on the streets. Now, in that case, their teaching of their values or how they behave at home plays a very large part in the social learning process. As educators, how do you partner with the parents in ensuring that they are not teaching something very different to the child, because then that's going to leave the child confused, right? Upama ma'am, if I may come to you first with this, if you would please unmute yourself.
Yes, sir.
Yes, ma'am.
Sir, can you kindly repeat the question?
Yeah, yes. I'm just trying to find out that when parents are also a part of the social learning process, how do you ensure that the parents' approach to it is aligned to yours? that the teachers and parents are not telling two different things?
Yeah, as I said earlier, parenting is quite a part of curriculum actually, because nowadays it's not just happening that parents are coming up to us that ma'am, how this particular thing is to be done. As Sophia ma'am has just given a broader view as she is handling kindergarten kids. So it becomes quite important that the parent is informed what my child is to do and what is the procedure by which the teacher is teaching the child. I'll give you a simple example. When we start with the kindergarten classes, we come across many parents who come to us and say it proudly that my child knows ABC, A to Z, he is knowing oral. And there we are quite sure that here is again a problem cropping in front of us, because we are going to start with the phonic first, and they have taught the child with the methods they were themselves taught. So they are to give this insight that the methods of teaching, the pedagogy has changed drastically. The times we were in the schools and nowadays the curriculum is quite updated. If we have a review of the curriculum framework, the types of topics which we were studying in grade 8 or 9, that topic students are having in their grade 4 nowadays. So this is the gap between the two generations, which we, the educationists, the mentors, need to fill it out. I'm seconding Namrata ji when she says that she has a connect with the child, and at the same time, I feel every teacher, every educationist, every facilitator is a counselor at one end or the other when they are guiding the parent, where they are guiding the child, that this is how you need to see to it, that how you have talked to your parent today. We come across as small as things that the child is not eating green vegetables at home. We counsel such things also to the parents. So wherein the teaching, the education, there are not set boundaries for where are the areas in which we are to penetrate. We have a plethora of fields where we have to reach out so that the child reaches the zenith of education, the zenith of knowledge. So no doubt that teaching fraternity is known as the lighthouse, the powerhouse of ideas, of thoughts, of bondings. And yes, I still remember the times when I was in my school, and in Sanic School, Kapurthala, I was a day scholar. My father was a teacher there. But when I used to ride my bicycle, and one of my teacher who was going to their residence, which was in the school campus only, we would always get off the cycle and would start walking. We would not start walk parallel to our teacher, and they would say, "It's okay, beta, just go ride your bicycle, no issues." And this is the type of respect we would. Nobody has taught in our classes that this is the way you need to behave. So I commonly tell my children that. As we are holding a bonding, so even if you don't stand up and say good morning, good afternoon in the class, it's okay. Stand up when I am traveling in the same bus you are, and you stand up there saying, "Ma'am, please, there's no seat in the bus, you can sit over here." So such type of things. And when the term comes to talk to the parent, that we need to guide them, that the manner the teacher is teaching them, why is it important? We need to justify them that the procedure we are following has been adopted after many experiments which we have conducted through these long years of our pedagogical updation, the plannings which we are making in our schools. So it becomes quite important that the parent also has an insight that why only this method is there. We need to just give the not only give the justification, but need to communicate and to convince the parent that this is the best method through which this particular concept, this particular topic can be taught in a better way, and the recalling and the recognition of these particular things will be long lasting if we use this method as the one we are doing it in our schools. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Namrata ma'am, I'll come to you on this point as well. You said class 8 is when the students start interacting with you. And that is the time, I guess, when you're just kind of beginning to rebel against parental control, right? How do you see this equation changing when it comes to social learning?
So, you know, there are 2-3 things I've seen. One, to get the parent, we need to assess where the parent and the child are on the same page first. Because many a times the parents want something else for the child. The child wants something else for himself or herself. And we don't know what to do. The child is of importance. So we actually send out a parent questionnaire and we ask them, what do you think your child is good at? Or it makes us understand what the parents think of their children. We send a separate questionnaire for the students, and then we try to assess that. The other thing that I want to always keep in mind is that when we keep the parent in loop. They need to know what is happening, why it is happening, as ma'am said, and then what is the goal for us for a particular thing. Now, today in the morning, I had a conversation with parents, and the child wasn't there. Parents said, well, oh, my child does not like to read, the father. The mother said, but she has to learn to read. So he said, but she's a more action person. Now I, in the middle, had to say, okay, fine, she's an action person, but she will go to college where she will have to read. So she needs to get into the habit of reading. Now let's find out what she likes to read. So that's the first step, to be able to tell them and explain to them what our final goal is. You know, they won't understand. As children don't understand the reason for a certain, why am I studying history? Why do I have to do geography? I am not going to use it. If we connect the dots in their minds for them, give them and take them through that process of why this is important, the learning is much more. Where in parents, what I've also seen is, I've seen some parents come and talk to us, and in their conversations say to me, oh, someone else can write the essay for the child, or oh, their teacher is bad. Now that's a behavior that pains my heart, because that's not a role model. You are teaching your child to disrespect their teachers. You're teaching your child unethical behavior. And then they will say, ma'am, but why is he behaving like this? So if we are not as role models, and simple things, we tell a child, oh, you know what? You're always watching TV. And what are we doing? We're always watching TV. So it's bad for them, but not bad for us. The child does not know how to distinguish that. We say to them, no phones on the dining table. And then a call comes, we pick it up and go out. It could be a work call, but we go out to take that call. So how is their work less? Or their friends call for some crisis in their personal life, maybe their mom, or they've got bad dinner and they need to discuss an Instagram reel that they've seen. For them, that's their life. How can we put and say that that is not right for you, but it's okay for me as an adult? Wrong. That's where we are going wrong. If there is a rule, no TV while eating, no one watches TV. If there's a rule, no phones when you're working, you cannot be, everyone is working from home now. They're watching you work. We tell them, be respectful to the staff. And at the same time, as parents, we scream at the staff. They're learning that behavior. If we, we need to be aware of what they are doing. What I've also seen parents not understand behaviors of their children is because they do not know what their children watch, what social media platforms they are doing, what these challenges are, don't rush challenge, this, that, whatever is happening. And these are all kids from grade 5 onwards are on to, who made their Instagram profile? Why do they have a Snapchat? Why are they playing Call of Duty? I was shocked at a time where there's this game PUBG, which has now been banned, where children, when they're playing, they're actually playing in their underclothes. So the incentive to play was they could buy and win games to get a piece of clothing. And there were clothings in picture where they would aim to buy that image. So right now our children want a certain image with all the Instagram, body image. They want to look nice. They want to look like the next model. And the game tried to do that. Now, if the parent doesn't know, ma'am, pura din PUBG khelta rehta hai. Do you even know the game? Try to find out what they are watching. Try to see. Only then can a conversation happen. Only then can you, and you cannot, in this day and age, you cannot say, oh, I'm going to switch off the internet. Try doing it. There'll be a revolt in the house. But you need to be able to teach them and understand what they're watching. I just watched something before this session, which my daughter showed me. It was a reel of this young girl. She must not be more than 12 years of age, full makeup. And there was something coming up, and it's so, it's such bad stuff that I can't say it in a webinar. And I was shocked. I came inside disturbed, saying that this is what children are watching. So, but we need to tell them. Now she's 23. She could just show it to me and say, Mom, such foolish stuff is there on Reels, on Instagram. Why is your child on Instagram? She should not, he should not, but it is, they will be. Try to be, they all have 2 accounts. All children have 2 accounts. One for the parents, who they make friends, and the other one private. What is happening in their private? It's a very scary, I don't want to scare you all. I talk to young adults every single day, at least 10 in a day. I know what is happening because they feel that they can tell me what actually is happening. Closed rooms. There should be no closing of rooms. Remove the latches of the house. They cannot latch the house, the bedroom door, their room door. Make sure you can walk in anytime, knock and walk. But there are certain things parents need to be at the same page. Right now we are here and our kids are here, but actually the kids are here. We need to come onto the same page for us to be able to explain and understand. And that is through self-learning about what is in their lives, what they're doing. And then can we help them? Sorry, I went on and on. I get very disturbed with what I hear and see. Yeah.
Well, I guess this is extremely important information for everybody, and also gives me the perfect segue into my next question, which actually Upma ma'am spoke something earlier which stuck with me. A parent complaining about a child not eating green vegetables. Years back, somebody had the same problem and came up with the idea of a superhero character who would eat spinach to gain a lot of strength. And Popeye the Sailor Man, one of the most popular iconic characters in cartoons, was born that way. Today, content, and as ma'am said, internet is ubiquitous. The kids, they typically take a checkbox saying I am 18 and above when they're signing up for these accounts, and none of them really are. Dr. Arora, if I may come to you with this, uh, given the amount of information that these children are now seeing, and any amount of check that you see, you can check their history. Fact is, they know how to subvert those systems. How do you then build a system or put in place a system that the child knows that, okay, this might be fun to discuss with friends for 5 minutes, but this is wrong. Because at the end of the day, that value judgment is important, I guess.
So, a very interesting question you have asked me, and I wanted to touch upon it. When we were talking about that parents, how do you manage that things are reaching to parents? I believe in unconscious drilling of certain things. As Upma ma'am was saying, that processes are very important, and telling people, telling the parents that this is a process through which we are going to let children pass to reach to a particular goal. In the same way, when you are teaching observations and when you are making your children, the vast plethora of observations which are coming their way, and they are unnaturally, or you can say unconsciously, picking up from anywhere around them. It can be internet, it can be friends, it can be some relative coming to their place. So it is tantamount that we actually fix the major, points. Like those major points can be your value systems. Your value systems need to be actually defined in detail, like and those value systems can be drilled down into your children's mind. I always say there are stages to children's learning, which many of the psychologists have already proposed. But this is my own thinking that in the age where child is studying till 5th or till 6th or sometimes till 4th as well, you need to drill down certain things into their minds. For example, simple living, high thinking. Honesty is the best policy. So you remember we used to learn these small proverbs, and we used to learn and drill down these things into our psychology. And when we reached to that stage of 6 to 8 to 6 to 10, we started actually joining the dot of learning those lines and then relating them to our lives. So I believe that is very important, that we are in the smaller children, younger children, Sophie ma'am was talking about, it is very important to drill down such kind of words: honesty, discipline, integrity. Such kind of words are very important. New Year promises. Like in my school, we did an activity. What is your New Year promise? So a child can promise to eat green vegetable. A child can promise to, say good morning to dad or mom. The child can promise to touch the feet of the elders. It can be anything under the sun. We didn't define any category. We just gave them we gave them an idea that you do it like this, and then whole class sheet was being placed in the classroom so that every child can observe what others are doing, so that they can learn this could have been a better thing to do. So what I mean to say, major things are to be defined by you. Major value systems are to be drilled down till the child is in the class 5 or class 6. From 6 to 10 class, it is important that child has started learning and relating their learnings to the life skills. And at that age, when the child is in class 9, when the child is in class 10, critical analysis has to be developed. And then suppose I would like to quote this example. We all remember there was a case going on the last June, July month. And then there was a heroine who was actually being said that she is the culprit. Some of the channels were telling she is a culprit, and another channels were telling that she is completely innocent. My son, who was studying in class 9, he came up to me and he said, "Mama, what do you think, who is right and who is wrong?" Then I, instead of telling him that she is right or she is wrong, or that channel is right or that channel is wrong, I gave him the whole perspective. Okay, iske piche, this can be the scenario, iske piche, that can be the scenario. Then he came up with his own theory. He researched and rehearsed a lot, and he watched so many videos, and then he came up with his truth, and he realized that there is some hidden truth, but we cannot predict on the basis that she or the heroine was actually the culprit. So this is critical analysis skill which we actually need to teach our children. So one thing was drilling down these things into the children, setting up the value system for us, for the school, for the parents. It is very important to define values in the schools. You remember our schools which were opened like 30 years back, 20 years back, or even today, they are having one line common. I mean, you will always say in the mission and vision statement, values rooted children. You remember something like that was being done in every vision and mission statement of the schools. That was done because that was a common point which everybody should exude. Now, since we have started advertising our schools as a STEM lab hub, we have started advertising that we are introducing French, we are introducing Italian. We have stopped actually giving emphasis on value system. So it is very important to do emphasis on value system, which is going to be the, you can say, central point where children can actually go into various directions, but then they will not fall prey to being, you know, a culprit. At least there will be chances when they'll be doing something wrong, such kind of a notion will come to their mind, and that will knock their mind, and they will return back from the highest points of ecstasy, which they are getting from Instagram or for posting something wrong, which Namrata ma'am was just mentioning right now. So I think that is most important. So I keep on drilling such kind of things in my teachers as well. Roko, toko, mat jane do. So these kind of things are very important. That's it. So that is one of my observations, which I wanted to just share with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Because of paucity of time, I know this discussion could go on for much longer. We will have to cut this short at some point. But Sophie, ma'am, I have just one last question for you. You are catching them young, right? For everybody else on this panel, it's like fixing the engine of a running car. You have the car before it started running. What are those things that you are doing to make responsible netizens, right? These people will grow up to adopt internet in a big way. If we have seen internet as a big part of our life, these people are growing up with internet. A lot of them have been given videos as toddlers so that the parents will just quieten them down. What are you telling them? What are you teaching them to ensure that their social learning process starts off on the right foot?
Being the head of the institution, I'm also responsible for the grooming of the parents. The foremost thing for me is not only my school, my staff, my teaching and my non-teaching, which I'm talking about. No, for me, my family, my entire unit is involving the parents and their kids. So my first thing is that before I even start the session, every new session, I take on a very serious parents orientation program before the new session starts, where I've got written guidelines which may fall under the school rules, and also some ethical guides which I incorporate in my guidelines, and I verbalize them and explain to them the first thing. All of them, they must understand that a school is a place, it's not only for the kids to learn, even the parents have to come and learn and unlearn and relearn many things which have gone by now, and they have to start learning afresh. Because once you're a parent of a first, most of the children are maybe the first child. So you are a new being firstly. You might have grown up, but you are a parent for the first time. You are coming to a school as a parent for the first time. So you are not aware of exactly what you are supposed to be knowing and how you're supposed to be dealing with many of the aspects at home. So I take down this as a very, very important part of my beginning of the session. And I do a very serious parents orientation with all my parents, including my teaching and my non-teaching staff, because they ought to also be present, because we are a family. We have, all of us are a family, and we are clapping with two hands. If I and my teachers are doing that, and back at home, when parents are not aware how they are supposed to support their children, we are not clapping with two hands. So if we are not clapping with two hands, the children don't develop. They do not know how to do, because then they see the difference. The school is doing something, and back at home, my parents are not aware. And my mamas and my papas, they don't know. They do not want to actually fall prey of something that they don't know. So I do not want the parents to fall into the category of, you have no idea what my teachers teach me, and you have no idea how my teachers teach me. So from the very beginning, I make my parents understand. I literally make them understand that you have got to become very smart. No, even though you may not be coming from an English medium background, you may be from a vernacular background, That makes no difference here to me. But the main thing for me is my teachers are at par with many things. They are skilled, they are trained, they are experienced in how to handle these young ones. Though you are a mother, you have no experience of handling those children the way my teachers, even though they have not got married, they know how to handle them. Many of them are spinsters yet, but they know how to handle, and not only single, they handle them in group. So they know because they are technically trained. So I just love to have my parents also coming on board to understand that you may have any qualification, that doesn't make any difference to me. When you are a part of my family, you need to have some kind of education, how to actually function back at home and even in school. So this is the first thing that I try and do this. And then I have a lot of, workshops conducted every quarterly or every bi-monthly, small. There are a lot of, because in the preschool segment now, we are going to include standard 1 and standard 2 also in the preschool segment, according to the new national education policy. So now we've got 5 years to take care of. Earlier it was nursery, lower KG, upper KG. Now we've got standard 1 and standard 2 also, which is coming. So we've got more children, more parents to understand that every child likes to see that their parents at home know what they are asking about. Because when the teacher is teaching in the school, back at school, the teacher is confident, but the parent is not confident. And there is a kind of discrepancy between the parent and the child. And what happens here? The child does not respect the parents' ideologies, the parents' teaching style, and they think that the parents are not equipped well to teach them at home. So they tell their parents that, no, you have no idea, you don't know. My ma'am has taught me this, and this is how it needs to be pronounced, because they are taught phonics. Before they are taught alphabets, they are taught phonics, and then the alphabet comes later. So the parents do not know that. So I send in audio clips. I do a lot of technical trainings to the parents, especially the moms, because they are handling the children at home. And I try and educate them as much as possible so that children feel comfortable back at home while they are studying with their parents, be it mom or be it dad, whoever gives them time. I try and do that. And also what I feel is, since we get the children, and this is the formative years, and we cannot ignore any learning, the moral values, this is very, very important. And we try to, convey the message through songs, through stories that have got some very good moral values. We do not touch upon any stories that has got a sad ending or a negative ending, because that leaves a long-lasting impact on a child's cognitive, because when you are telling them a story, they get into the world of the story, and then they get linked with that. So they try, So my story therapy sessions also happen in such a way that I tell the teachers and the parents also that in case if a child is doing all children are made differently, and they have various behavioral problems, behavioral approaches. Some are very good, some are not that tolerant, some things which you as parent will not want to tolerate. Now, how can you actually try and help the child? What of that? You give the child an imaginary world with same situation that the child is actually behaving in front on day-to-day basis. Let the child connect with that imaginary character through the story and make the correction in the story as desired by you. So, and then after the child has heard that, the child is trying to check, I do this, yes, like that Ram or Sham or Roman or whoever, whatever character we say, I am like this person, but this person is trying to behave in a very different manner in a given situation rather than me doing in the same way. So the child also tries to correct himself or herself, even at that age. Children are, as I said, they are very good imitators. as well as they can do a lot of, corrections by themselves. They need not be told every time. You just got to tell them, and you need to know how, as ma'am was saying, that we have to get into their mind. We have to allow them to come to us and us going into their mind. We are not supposed to be standing into different levels and talking with them. We have to come down to their level and become so much a part of them that they can come and tell us anything. My kids don't fear me at all. They know I'm the principal of the school, but they love to come to me. And all the problems, if they have with anybody in the class, when they get the time, if they're passing by, they will come into my office, or when I'm going on a round, or when I'm there in their classroom, they will come and tell me, this is what is happening here, and this is what happened at home also. So you try and see, because they confide in you, they find something that they can relate and they can confide also. So this is something that you should take as advantage and try and give them the right feedback in the level that they can take, and help the child have a clear mind. And the value education is something which is very, very vital and very important from the very. And parents, yes, they do need to understand their language at home, their behavior towards their spouse, towards the grandparents at home. They watch all these things. The grandparents' treatment, how are they being treated? How are grandparents treating the others at home? How are we treating our helpers at home? Even our siblings or our neighbors, they are watching everything. They are completely taking in everything. And you know what they do? They simply let you open in front of public. They will let everybody know what you do in secret is not what you do in open. They open up and they tell the parents, no, this is not what you do at home. You don't do this at home. You do this at home. So the parents try to keep them quiet. And I, being into this for so many years and being a specialist in this, I understand. Then I speak to the parents separately. I call them on a different day, not on that very day. I speak to them separately, making them realize that don't have two faces. Just try to be a genuine mother or a genuine father, and try to carry that genuineness with you whenever you're interacting with your child, and especially when you're trying to teach the child something which is related to moral, because that is lifelong learning. And that skill needs to be done from the very beginning of the formative years. Thank you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. I would, as I said, I would have loved to continue with this, but because of paucity of time, we'll have to close this discussion here. Once again, people who are attending, I think we have some very key takeaways today. Do remember to behave responsibly online or offline around people, because you are being watched by children who are learning from your behavior. When you're posting something online, imagine, would you like your own child to see that post? Would you like your child to emulate from that post? Even if you're behaving on offline, dealing with staff, dealing with anybody, remember that you are being watched by children who are perhaps going to watch you and copy it. So behave more responsibly, something that I think the adults need to learn as much as the children do. Well, I must thank all of you for your time and for this absolutely wonderful discussion we had today. I will now hand you over to Achin for the formal vote of thanks, but this has been an absolute privilege. Achin, over to you.
Yeah, I think a really wonderful session we had. I must appreciate all our esteemed panelists for taking their time out and enriching this platform, for gracing this platform, and all our esteemed educators with their thought process. Sophie ma'am, must appreciate some very good points you brought out, including the fact that preschool children are like a sponge. Couldn't agree more. So naturally, observation comes before speaking. I think this is a very, very important point that you have raised. And also, I guess the other point that you've raised with regard to involvement of parents and the need to continuously counsel them, parents orientation program, workshops, etc. Undoubtedly, very, very important, because like as I think you very rightly mentioned, that we need both hands to clap. So naturally, that parents and school need to be in sync. So I completely agree with you on that. Dr. Arora, again, very nicely you summarized, ma'am, these 3 points, which I'm sure are going to be major takeaways from this session. One, like I think very aptly put, that defining the major value systems, defining the major pointers with regard to values. Second, joining the dots and being able to relate to them. And third, I think critical analysis, which you also give a great example of. So these 3 undoubtedly are very, very important. And the last point as well, vision and mission. So not to lose sight of it. So I think very, very well said. Must appreciate. Upma ma'am, I thank you for your time. And I think few things that you mentioned in this forum really stays with me and also with our esteemed audience as well. The need to keep parents informed. I think very, very important. Something that Sophie ma'am also touched upon. And also the fact that so much of changes in curriculum. So the role of an educator in terms of being able to bridge that gap, I think that's a very important aspect. And also the fact that teaching is not confined to classrooms. Thus, aspects like procedure, pedagogy, etc. And the need to convince parents, they need to be indeed not only informed, but as important stakeholders, taking them on board, taking them into confidence, giving that extra effort to actually convince them so that they not only support in letter, but also in spirit. They're completely in sync with that view that, okay, this is a particular pedagogy and a lot of research has gone into it. And they understand the need for it as well, and the justification. I thank you for this. Namrata ma'am, some great takeaways. In fact, when you were speaking, I was listening very patiently. Some very important points you mentioned, ma'am. Especially, I think, ensuring that parents and child, both of them on the same page, which very often, like you rightly mentioned, your experience, very often you see a gap. And also, I think, very nice examples that in order to be a role model, we indeed need to live those values, actually demonstrate those values. So be it any rule, so be it with regard to watching TV or with regard to rules with regard to taking calls during dinner time. And also, I think knowing our children, which is very, very important. And unless until parents also give that extra effort, go that extra mile in trying to actually know, and not only merely mention that, okay, fine, they're playing a particular game, they're playing PUBG, but then what actually is PUBG? Or the fact that, as you rightly mentioned, that at times multiple social media accounts, etc., which are very common, like, day in and day out, we come to terms of this. But instead of blaming the child, I think it's also equally important, and the onus is on parent as well, to go the extra mile and ensure. And of course, parents can do that, right? And they're with all that good intentions, only a question of taking that extra effort. So if they do that, of course, things will be much, much better. So I think great session we had. I sincerely thank all of you for your time today. It has been really wonderful, very seamless discussion, and a lot of value addition. In fact, I was looking at the comment section as well when our session was progressing. A lot of great feedback and some very interesting queries also. And if there's anything which we have not responded to, of course, we'll try to respond to them over mails and get in touch with our esteemed panelists to seek their views on them. I thank all of you. I thank our esteemed audience as well. Thank you. Take care and goodbye.
Thank you, Achin. All the best.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Bharat, sir. Really wonderful
Thank you so much
beginning.
for having us. Thank you.
My pleasure.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Taking leave.
Thank you so much.